Hello, my honored guests. Welcome to our delightful abode here at the Proving Grounds. We welcome you, all of you, as today's feature presentation is Little Nightmares. Little Nightmares was originally a game that came out back in 2017, and I played it pretty relatively early in its lifetime one time randomly. And it was originally a PS4 and Xbox game, but it would later get a few different versions of the complete edition and also come to the Switch, PC, and even become GOG DRM-free. Yeah! Now, Little Nightmares is what I would describe as a puzzle, platformy, survival horror kind of experience. And it's in the defenseless kind of way. It's a 2.5D world, so it's 3D. You still have depth of going backwards and forward towards the screen, but the game's perspective is side scrolling in that. And it has a very nice atmosphere. But let's get into the story. So the story, the original base story, you wake up as six in a very odd environment with very little to go on. The game has no real dialogue or anything to go off. It's very environmental in what's going on in the game. It's very left to you to interpret what the story is and what is going on. But you wake up and you basically make your way through your environment, which slowly shows is a very terrible place, as numerous things are trying to kill and eat you as you try to escape this hellhole that you're in. And you'll slowly learn where you are, more about what's going on, and slowly come to your own conclusions on what's going on in the story. It's definitely one of the funner things to interpret, as it leaves a lot of things up to you to interpret. As six, you will Wayne that you're just a really small person compared to some of the much larger people you will see in this world that are a hindrance to you. You can run, you can jump, you can grab, you have a light source that is a lighter that you can light and dim on your needs. As being a spooky game, there is a lot of darkness and a lot of need to be shrouded in it or be able to see in it. And you can crouch, and you can also do a slide when running and hitting the crouch button, which is useful for getting through small temporary spaces that are about to close, as there are a few moments that. Basically, though, you are defenseless, though. There are only a few times that you have a few means to defend yourself with other things in the environment, but overall, you have to rely on hiding and stealth from the things that are trying to kill you, running away, stealth, and such. Now, it's very puzzle platformy outside of the escape kind of scenes. You'll be trying to problem solve, getting out of many rooms, moving on, pulling switches, how to get the things, moving, climbing, jumping, Shadow Colossus style. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, maybe not that kind of crazy epicness, but yeah, you know. It is a simple game, in my opinion. It's not anything crazy when it comes to the gameplay, but there are a few good and interesting puzzles in the game. I like to think kept it pretty fresh up to the end and everything. There are different situations, and especially with the things that chase you down, and that you'll have your several encounters with different ones and different ways to deal with them. Now, I did mention there was DLC with this game, and I actually just played that DLC recently for Halloween this month. There were 3 DLCs, and they are available either individually, or they can be gotten with a pass, or you can get one of the complete editions, which I will have a lot of things to say about these different complete editions, but they primarily come with a code that is a pass for the DLC. Now, if you're like me and you bought the original day one release, which came with a little figure of Six, who is the main character of the base game, and that's actually quite expensive now, actually. You kind of got duped out of the DLC because later the complete editions would hit the shelves and you just kind of felt like, well, I got screwed. I certainly felt like that myself. But in the DLC, these 3 DLCs are about like an hour to an hour 30 minutes each, and they star a new character that's referred to as the Runaway Kid. Now, the Runaway Kid basically functions just like 6 does in the base game, but the big difference between the two is the light source. 6 has a lighter, which gives a very nice ambiance to the environment of darkness. But the Runaway Kid gets a flashlight. Not as spooky as having the lighter in the darkness, but it actually gives him a few mechanical differences, a few advantages, and specifically near the end of the DLC, some definite advantages for what his final encounters are like. But it stays mainly true to what the original base game is. You'll be exploring through the facility that you're in, solving puzzles, trying to also escape. Now, these two stories are happening relatively around the same time, as you can find slight hints of the two different characters in their different stories. So, at some point in time, the two are doing things at a relatively same time, or near each other at least. The DLC, in my opinion, at the end of the day, didn't feel like it was necessarily the biggest must-go buy play, but if you definitely enjoyed Little Nightmares, getting it's not necessarily a bad thing, as it's just more Little Nightmares from a different perspective that gives you a little bit more ideas to throw into your theory crafting on what's going on in the story of the game. Overall, though, I could recommend Little Nightmares as a fun puzzle game. I think that's the bigger draw, is the gameplay wise, is the puzzles, but you know, survival and a lot of the creepy, horrific things you see in the game, or of course a nice touch. They have very nice graphics for everything. It has a very, how should I say, an interesting kind of puppetry clay kind of look to a lot of things. It's a very nice art style, and the music and everything is mainly for the mood, but there are a few portions where you have a wee bit of music depending on what's going on, but it's mostly moody. That I didn't really have any problems with the original base game, which I played on the PS4, but it is important to note that I played the DLC through the complete edition on the Switch, because, well, I didn't have the DLC before, and that's how I got. Again, I'll go into the complete thing when we get on to the value and such. That yeah. But compared to the Switch has longer load times, and I did experience, I don't know if this is necessarily just the Switch version or the DLC on any platform, but during the second DLC, you do interact with the gnomes, which you see throughout the two games. But the gnomes play a very big part in the second DLC, as you have to find them. And a few gnomes kind of vanished on me. And I don't know if that necessarily was a big deal or not. I reloaded the game in that to, or died, or, you know, got the game to re-trigger a checkpoint or that. And I don't know if that was necessarily necessary, but it was a little confusing. It happened like 3 times. It was kind of wonky at that. It didn't end the day, but it was a bit of an inconvenience. Outside that, I didn't really have any problems with playing the DLC on the Switch or the base game on the original PS4. Actually, funnily enough, the original PS4 version for me still has absolutely no update for the game, oddly enough. That's actually pretty commendable, to be honest. Let's see, let's double check. Let's see, the updates that were made were for basically the DLC, really. And they added, wow, they added PS4 Pro 60 frames and improved some things in the game. So it did get updates way later. Interesting. I don't actually remember. My Avado updated. My bad. And so it did get a few updates, but it was more later, and they didn't seem like to be big things. I didn't run into any errors either way. Is my point. It was perfectly playable, perfectly enjoyable. So what would I say I would value Little Nightmares? Well, that's kind of a subjective opinion on, are we just talking about the base game, the DLC, or the complete package? Personally, I felt like it was a little scummy because basically it wasn't too far. Let me look at the exact date here. The exact date it originally came out was in April 2017. The first DLC came out in July of 2017. So it was only a few little months away, and then they started pumping out these DLCs, and then they pumped out the complete edition that gave you a season pass that gave you all of them. And that was kind of like a fuck you to the original buyers and pre-orders of this game, in my opinion. But honestly, I think $19.99 is a good price for the completion of all of this content. The DLC, like I said, doesn't feel like a mandatory type thing to experience. It's just more, if you want more Little Nightmares, before there actually was a Little Nightmares 2, it was a way to get a little bit more nightmares. But it didn't really feel like it was absolutely necessary at all. But it gives you a little bit more time, but I feel like $19.99 is a good price for the entire package of Little Nightmares. So, $19.99 is what the base price of this game is digitally, if you on any of the stores that sell base Little Nightmares. If you want the complete edition sells for $29.99 on digital stores and in retail. Now, retail-wise, that becomes a little bit more trickier because the big problem with the retail option is if you want the complete edition, which is why I recommend getting, unless you really, really, really want the launch edition, the 6th edition, and like I said, that's kind of expensive. It's like, oof, it's like $100 cribbed. I don't know who's buying that. But the complete edition is really bizarre because all of them except, and this is as far as I understand, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I understand, the PAL Nintendo Switch version is the only version where it's actually complete physically. As far as I understand, every other complete edition, regardless of region, has codes in it for the DLC. As far as I understand. And the Switch version and PAL has gone on and off on being available over time, but it has been continuously restocked, so it hasn't ran dry yet, and you can still find it between like $25-$29 for the PAL Switch copy. And that's likely what I would recommend to you if you want a complete physical edition of the game. It's maybe a little bit of a downgrade compared to the other consoles and computers you can get graphically, but you know, if you like physical media, likelihood you have a console anyway. So, but yeah, as far as I know, none of the disc ones are complete on disc at all. So that's a bit of a shame for anyone who's a non-Switch owner, but that'll be up to your debate. And I did mention the game is on Steam and GOG, so, and that's fantastic in that front. I congratulate people that letting it be on GOG. I mean, that's good. Now, I do want to point out on GOG, though, there is one oddity on GOG. There is no complete edition on GOG. There's the base game, the 3 DLCs individually, each $3.99, and you can also get the season pass for $9.99. So instead of paying $3.99 for each of the 3, you can just get them all together for $9.99. So a little odd they don't just have a complete priced package, but they're all there and available, so it's not really anything to complain about, honestly. So you got lots of options and fun to behold. But yeah, if you're gonna get any of the complete versions or get the DLC, you're gonna be paying more than the $19.99, which is a little bit of a shame, but you know, it is a bit of an older game, so you can look into getting used copies for the base game, but sadly, you're not going to get the DLC that way, even if it's a complete edition, unless it's a PAL Switch version. It's like, why? Why do this to us? Must we just suffer? But yeah, you're just gonna kind of, unless you get lucky and nobody used the passcode and it's not expired. Sometimes that can happen. Always remember, kids, when you buy a used game with a code, try out the code. It might actually work. You'd be surprised at times. But you still can get brand new versions of any of the complete editions if you do specifically want the PS4 or Xbox One versions. Those are still readily available, so you won't have trouble buying them. They are not super rare or anything unless you want the collector's edition stuff. That's a whole different, can of worms though. But at the end of the day, I definitely do recommend this for puzzle nuts and those who want a twisted visual look. I think those are the big highlights of this game. So let's get into spoilers then, shall we? Spoiler warriors, everyone, spoilers. So one of the first things, you never told anything for quite a while, but when you play the game, you notice the actual environment is like slowly going left and right like a boat. So that's like your first indication, but you do later get confirmation that you're in a really gigantic ship, and most of the ship is actually underwater, hence a lot of the leaking in the stage. But you basically find out you're in this weird, and like I said, a lot of the story is interpretation, so don't take everything I'm about to say for fact. I'm trying to keep it on the down low and not throw in my own opinions on things. But basically, you're trapped on this ship that's feeding people lots and lots of gluttony food. And a lot of this food is supposedly children, as you see lots and lots of indications that they are feeding children to these people. And you're basically just trying to escape this horrible situation. Now, your character in the base game gets really, really hungry over the course of the game and eats different things. And by the end of the game, you eat the supposed owner of the ship and steal her powers to take, like, life from people or something. Like, at the end, you're like walking through the ship, killing all the guests that were trying to kill you earlier, and that it's really bizarre ending. And I know for a good while, a lot of people really were trying to figure out what the fuck really happened. It's kind of like the Danganronpa one, you know? It just leaves you there hanging. What's the real mystery going on? You know? But it's an enjoyable game, and the DLC, the reason I feel like the DLC is more trending on old territory versus really giving anything new is ultimately at the end, and I forgot about this. I had to actually get reminded this because, like I said, this came back out in 2017, and I just recently played through the DLC. But at the end of the DLC, you have a much different fight with the final boss of the base game. A very different type of fight with using the flashlight against little shadow creatures, but you do get captured and you get changed into one of the gnomes. And at the end of his DLC, you travel to a specific location that you get to as 6, which indicates, it doesn't show it happening, but it basically implicating that this gnome who 6 actually kills in the base game, eating it, was the Runaway Kid. And that's really it. It didn't really add a whole lot since all the characters the Runaway Kid interacted with or characters 6 got, so you didn't really have a big opportunity to be like really more to anyone, though I am a little confused about Granny, because both characters won the Granny, and the Runaway Kid pushes a TV into the water and electrocutes Granny, so unless there's multiple Grannies, there must be, they must have encountered Granny different times, but 6 had to have encountered Granny first. Then, like I said, the two all progressing through Ma at a similar time to each other. It's actually interesting when you look at the chapter select mode. It shows the chapters lined up with each other. That gives you a little bit of an idea of how they're synced up. But the One Way Kid is only 3 stories, so it's, you know, a little bit shorter. This isn't a incredibly long game, also on top of that. I did beat this, I believe, in 1 or 2 days. Like I said, it's been a while. It's not a super long game, but it is an enjoyable little experience that I definitely would check out. But those are my thoughts on Little Nightmares. It's been quite a while since I played the original base game, and it was nice to revisit it. It's been long due, and like I said, it was mainly because I did want to play the DLC, but I just never really got around to it because, you know, my hatred of fucking download stuff, and I don't have a very good setup for doing PC live streams and that, so otherwise I would have just went with the GOG versions. But there were lots of nice options. There's no real excuse to not be able to play Little Nightmares. Again, recommended for those who like the art style and puzzle gameplay. I think those are 2 good highlights. Anyway, so hopefully soon I'll be able to get around to Little Nightmares 2. And it looks good, and if it's anything like the first one, it'll be a crazy wag-tang time. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Little Nightmares and its 3 DLCs. If you have any additional questions or anything, feel free to leave a comment down below or send me a message. And if you feel like you learned anything interesting at all, please feel free to leave a like. And if you feel like you learned nothing at all, feel free to leave a dislike. Feel free. And until next time, don't get eaten by anything, because the meat shop is coming back in Little Nightmares 2. Wee-haw!